And welcome to Lost in Transit. When education data doesn't travel, we have more education information than ever, and yet at every level of the system, something is getting lost in transit.
Center for Education Statistics for some decades, and during that time I encountered a lot of data use horror stories while I was supporting the Secretary's office. And in one particular case, his office, or her office, it's not the current administration, called me up and said, oh, we got 3 Pinocchios in the Washington Post for our latest policy support data. Can you help us straighten this out? And so I looked at what they had done, and they had averaged in zeros instead of not applicables, and drove down the numbers to a remarkable extent. And I just told them, we better not do a letter to the editor on this thing, because we might get 4 Pinocchios by the time we're done. So they had let it go at that. But I mean, that's just a kind of one example where there's real fallout from some of these statements. And policymakers, they usually don't know exactly what they're saying, right? They're relying on policy analysts and stuff to provide the talking points, but there's certainly a lot of room for improvement in terms of educating those people to have statements that can be supported by evidence. So there's lots of misuse by data every day, I would say.
Tom, I was going to say, I feel like every data set should come with a warning label, you cannot do this with it. We all know about the misnapery that's out there. Every time NAEP comes out and people are like, it proved this and it proved that. And you're like, it's not quite that simple. I mean, you can use it for research purposes, but on its own, there's a lot of things that you have to use caution in how you talk about them. And I don't think people always exercise that level of caution, to your point.
Practice, I agree with Cara. It takes a lot more effort to figure out how do you think about applying what it is that we're learning in research to the work that someone is actually doing in the classroom, at the district level, whatever level you're at. But one thing that I think about a lot is how policymakers and practice decision makers, as I said, want to know what's effective. And researchers often have lots of caveats to the work that they've got going on, right? Because we're trained to be that way, to be very, very careful, to look at the p-values and know that there's a chance that our analyses are actually incorrect. And there's a caution I want to put out there around that, because when we're too cautious and we're putting out too many caveats to everything that it is that we're studying, we're actually making it so that the findings are less relevant for people who want to use them. There are things we know, and that takes bodies of research for sure. Things are not relying on a single test of one little intervention, but we do know a lot about, we have a deep understanding of student learning and the conditions that we can create that actually support that learning. We know that creating safe and caring environments with instruction that both promotes deeper learning and is community connected makes a difference, actually matters more for students, for their families, makes everybody in the school more engaged. But there are times where researchers are hesitant to say that something will make a difference. So my encouragement would be that, yes, it's important to be rigorous in your research. It's important to document all of your methods and the details and the caveats. But when you're really trying to actually connect it for policymakers or practice decision makers, that shouldn't be front and center. Know that your work is strong, but then really focus on what matters for them. And don't be afraid to elevate those findings.
I think what we know is that the federal government plays a tremendous role and is the largest investor in data collection and research, and that there is an efficiency of scale in having the federal government play a role here. In the current funding situation, we've seen tremendous pressures and increased on nonprofits and philanthropy and the number of requests they are receiving to fund critically needed research and evidence. If you think of the education, research, development, and dissemination system as sitting on a three-legged stool, you have the federal government in terms of knowledge production and knowledge investment. And then you have philanthropy, and then you have organizations outside the federal government, like KA members and non-KA members, who are doing the research work. And we've seen one of the legs of the stool, really get hacked at the knees a bit. And the pressures on the other two have been felt significantly. If you ask Spencer Foundation or other foundations, the number of requests they've received, they've been 100-fold in the number of applications. And I know if you speak to private philanthropy or to states, they just do not have the resources to fill the gaps left when the federal government does not play a role. And so I do think we need to continue to encourage Congress to invest in education, RD&D, IES, and funding for IES and EIR and the comprehensive centers and other programs that help support evidence-based decision-making are discretionary funding and require every year conversations with Congress about why these investments are important, and would just encourage everyone to continue to reach out to Congress and the administration and help them illuminate the stories of why these investments matter and make a difference for students' outcomes in their states, in their districts.
The first one is, if we have a district or state leader that's watching right now and they're worried about losing access to the data that they rely on, what is one practical thing that they can do right now? And that's for our panelists.
Yeah, I would say call their congressperson or their senator and the administration. Voices matter, and lifting up your voice and why this data matters to you is incredibly important. I learned something important when I transitioned from a researcher to a policy person, and it's, if you're not at the table, you're what's on the menu. And that's really important that people speak up.